Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Well, we're still waiting for some other people to arrive. I think it makes sense to make best use of our time and just start. I'm aware that it's not because people are lack of awareness of time, but there's also some traffic in this city that sometimes keeps people down. So no judgment here, and everybody who comes in later is welcome. For sure, also welcome to those people who've committed to contribute to this session. They're carefully been selected based on their involvement in the work and their earlier involvements also of the work of the Dynamic Coalition. But what you'll see is both from industry perspectives, but also from government perspective. And I'm sure with the people in the room here also from the civil society perspective will have a pretty good multi-stakeholder approach of this thing that is developing so rapidly in our time, the Internet of Things. So if I may move to the presentation online, to see the presentation there. I've seen my head before in the mirror every morning, so. You can sit here. That's a very quick introduction. Internet of Things is something that brings good things and comes with challenges. We cannot say, let's skip it because these challenges are too difficult or too daunting. But we should take the challenges seriously as well. And we can see that in this world today, which is intensely used, it will be impossible to continue without good use of technologies. At IGF, I would want to point at the specific, the Sustainable Development Goals, many of them that deeply require technology to help. Ranging from, let's say, monitoring the environment to better crop management and whatsoever. There's many applications out there, and applications are sometimes those that we just enjoy, like a Fitbit or something on our wall that makes it even easier to see how much energy we use. On the other side, we also see that there is applications just being developed on societal level, like the tsunami buoy on the upper left. Wouldn't it be great if we at least would have a little bit more pre-warning? And lo and behold, with technology, we can do that. This is the need to, and also the need to get it right. Here at the IGF, we're talking about how IoT to be developed from a global perspective. It is merely a specific aspect of the internet rather than something separate or something different. But it has specific characteristics, dealing with a lot of data and also autonomously or at least acting based on triggered by sensor data, then even by machine learning and AI automatically taking charge of part of our environment, obviously to our benefit, if it all works well. The Dynamic Coalition is set up in Hyderabad, so we gather already for quite a couple of years, and we aim to develop a shared understanding across stakeholder groups on global good practice with regards to this. Whereas there's a lot of meetings about IoT in the world, everywhere and all the time. In this, we meet as stakeholders on global terms, on global level, on equal terms. So that is the value that we have to offer, and that's why I welcome you so much in this session. You may have seen that we've developed a good practice principle. It's published on the IGF Secretariat's website. And it comes with more than just this paragraph. But basically, it's about taking ethical considerations into account from the outset, and thus to find the ethical, sustainable way ahead in the support of creating a free, secure, and enabling rights-based environment, a future we want. So what ethical exactly is something that will never be ready with determining, but we are zooming in on making that clear, as you will find in that paper. The current declaration focused on achieving reasonable trust through dividing together meaningful transparency to users, user control of data, education, security, privacy, and a commitment from stakeholders to take this into account from the outset on whatever role they play in this environment. Focus of today's session, because we're not going to talk only about the same things all the time, but is that 5 points that have been spelled out on the agenda as well, and that I asked the speakers to consider. First is the statement that this ethical approach in IT should find this balance between being sufficient from a civil society point of view and doable from a business point of view, and sustainable from a technical point of view. I mean, some technical solutions have been set up in the past that are not sustainable, particularly in this field. I want to point out that a lot of trials that have been set out with batteries that last for a limited period. All these things are still out there, but the batteries don't function anymore at times. So things like that. The second one, do we need a principle on using the most available technology possible? This one was triggered by the fact that we are here on global level and that the level of access, broadband access and technology isn't the same everywhere. Some of the services we may well be able to develop on GSM standard or LoRa or whatever. Why shouldn't we try to do that when we can? The third one is there's a high need to raise IoT awareness with citizens and consumers. I mean, even if industry wants to know what people want, then it's nice that people know what's possible and what's happening. In this, people should not be expected to be technical experts. In many of my talks, I would say this goes for politicians too. Another question is, would there be value in having an ontology for IoT applications so we understand different levels of sensitivity with regards to privacy, security, and safety? I say that because if we got a clear picture there, it helps us understand better what the challenges are and where the emphasis on addressing those needs to be. And the last one, and that is triggered by the attack on the DIN network a couple of, in the meanwhile, a month ago, I think, where dumb things, relatively dumb things, but still have computing power, have been used to take down the internet. The interesting thing is a lot of information on this one is online. Yet I think it's also a good trigger because it raises awareness at the right level that we should take this seriously. And from that point, I'd like to take it forward as well. Having said that, there's many more questions for tomorrow, which you can find on the website as well. But the focus will be on these. It's not my ambition that we're going to be exhaustive about all 5 of these subjects, but very much I would like you to focus on those subjects that you feel need to be addressed most. And then in the first place, I'm looking at the committed speakers. After that, I look at really involvement of all. Wolfgang, may I ask you Okay, the problem with the IGF as such is that we got a lot of interesting sessions. And many of them are about the same time. Megan Richards from the European Commission. European Commission has a lot of activities also specifically in this field. Megan has been involved for many years as well in this discussion. Thanks for your dedication there. And as you have a main session to be at in 10 minutes, please share what you wanted to bring on this.
Thank you very much, Martin, and I apologize for putting the agenda into disorder and for jumping in front of Wolfgang. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that from a European Commission perspective, we have been very much involved in the research and innovation aspects of Internet of Things for a number of years. And also, the Commission has launched something called the Alliance of Internet of Things actors. I think I've forgotten what the last A stands for, but AIOTA. And it's a multi-stakeholder group which brings together civil society members, industry, government, and other interested actors to look at implications of Internet of Things. And it covers a whole series of issues related to Internet of Things, which includes, of course, ethics, standards, research activities, innovation, and the way all the different actors can work together. So I just wanted to mention this. Martin, of course, knows about this very well. There are a number of members of the European Parliament here, and so they'll be able to give you also a perspective from citizens' point of view, I'm sure. So I apologize for jumping in, but I wanted to put that on the table, and I will follow the discussions from a distance. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for actually coming and getting that said.
Let me introduce you. Avridoria will be our moderator today.
Right. And I wasn't planning to jump in moderating, but since we already had one of our speakers speak, I figured I would thank the speaker. Wolfgang, if we can go to your talk.
I just want to make some very brief introductory remarks, because I was involved from the very early beginning of this dynamic coalition, which was established in the year 2007 in Hyderabad, when Internet of Things was still an emerging issue. So, by the way, Francis Muguet was also involved. He was a driver, and unfortunately he passed away in 2009, and we should remember his work he has done in preparing the field for the building of this dynamic coalition. Today, the Internet of Things is the Internet of everything, and so it's difficult also for this dynamic coalition to find its place, because it's discussed everywhere and at every time. And so we had with Martin a good meeting 2 years ago in Scheveningen, when the leadership was handed over to Martin, and I think since that we made tremendous progress by really finding out what this dynamic coalition can contribute to the global debate. There are a lot of IoT summits and meetings and conferences, but my observation is that a lot of these meetings are either one stakeholder meeting, so that technical experts discuss amongst themselves, government people discuss amongst themselves, and business people discuss amongst themselves, or they are isolated in their sectors. So you have people discussing smart cities, transport people discuss amongst themselves, the health people discuss amongst themselves. And I think this multi-stakeholder platform here is also a multi-sectoral platform, can pull people out of their silos and enable a dialogue, not about the specifics on technical details or business models. And insofar, I'm very happy that there's a general agreement that this will concentrate, at least for the moment, on the ethical dimension. Because, I remember when Madame Curie discovered the radium and all these others, when there was excitement, oh, fantastic, nuclear energy now. And then people started to think about it. And I remember the debate whether it's good or bad to have a nuclear bomb. Is there a good bomb? Is there a bad bomb? Is it good to kill a million people to save others' life or not? I think these are fundamental ethical questions related to research. And the group around Mr. Oppenheimer had a lot of issues, in pro and con, and to consider what is right, what is wrong, what we are doing with the inventions. And I think with the Internet of Things, we are moving in a similar situation where we have really to rethink, how we can get all this channeled in a way that it's useful for the future of mankind. And insofar, I think the ethical dimension is really important. First, we have to know what are the implications, and then we can make decisions. So it's not to make quick decisions, so we have not yet fully understood the implications of all these new technologies. And I stop here just to hope that this discussion here in this year and in the years ahead of us will help us to understand this complicated issue a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and very much appreciate your historical memory and for bringing that up. And I also want to thank you because you are the one that basically brought this dynamic coalition back to life after it had sort of drifted into inactivity. So now I'd actually like to go. So now I'd actually like to go back to the speaker order, and the first speaker we have is Karen Rose from the Information Society, Internet Society. It said Information Society, I read it, but please go ahead. I read what was written as opposed to saying what I knew, which is not a good thing to do.
Well, thanks a lot, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. IoT is something that I'm really excited about, because if we really look out to the next 5 to 10 years, this thing that we're calling the Internet of Things could really be a fundamental game changer, much more beyond the little interesting gadgets that we talk about, or even applications from improved health care to cities, agriculture, etc. If we really think about it, we are talking about the convergence between the internet and the physical world, and talking about what it really truly means in the future to live in a hyper-connected world, where the internet is connected to nearly everything around us. I think this could fundamentally change our relationship with the internet. If you think about it now, erroneously, but in many ways, the internet and the World Wide Web, people think they're synonymous, because so much of our interaction with the internet right now is between humans interacting actively with content in one way or another. But if we think into the context of 5 to 10 years of a hyper-connected world, our relationship with the internet could fundamentally change to one in which our relationship is more sort of a passive interaction with the internet, whether we're driving in smart cities, whether it's coming into our homes. So I think it's really fundamental. And as we've said here, there's great opportunities. I'm really excited about the potential for the future, but there's also really great challenges as well. I think we've seen, as was mentioned, some of the challenges really sort of coming to life, particularly recently, and it seems this year. The Dyn attacks from unsecured IoT devices, as was discussed. There was recently an attack in, I'm going to pronounce this and Jari can correct me, Lappeenranta in Finland, a town in Finland, where there was an attack on building automation that precluded to be able to control the heat and the cooling of this building, which if you're in Finland and it's the middle of winter and you can't control your heat, that's a potentially life-threatening thing. Also, the recent attack in San Francisco on the municipal rail system, right, which fare payment machines were down because of an attack. So we're really starting to see some of the challenges come to life here. And one of the things that's really different, I think, of a dimension of these challenges is that once human lives and assets are at stake because of attacks and insecurity, the stakes are going to go up, and governments are really going to want to react. In terms of privacy, we've already started seeing people starting to second guess their relationship with the internet, including with things like the Internet of Things. So our vision and the excitement for what we think IoT can accomplish is not going to happen if people are turning away from the internet or governments are reacting really strongly because of security issues and other concerns. So in terms of the statement on the ethical approach, just thinking about this, going back, I think the real key is about trust. And not only trust in terms of security, but about promoting trust in terms of the user perspective as well. are users going to be able to trust the objects that they're interacting with? This also, if we frame it in terms of trust, has a relationship with business as well. Because from a business perspective, IoT is not going to take off if people don't trust the internet, or don't trust these IoT objects. If governments don't trust the security of these objects and big restrictions are put on innovation. So one of my suggestions would be that perhaps we really take a look at sort of a multidimensional aspect of trust when we're talking about the ethical approaches, because it's so fundamental to ensuring that this technology can flourish, as well as us thinking about what kinds of practices need to be in place to promote that trust for all stakeholders involved. I know my time is short, but I have at least another minute. In terms of some practical approaches, I think one of the real challenges in this space is how to get practical about this whole range. If we're really talking about a hyper-connected world, it's really broad, but without becoming overly prescriptive, because the field is so dynamic. I think some practical principles and voluntary practical principles and best practices really need to be in place, and we really need to think about them. Now, there's a lot of best practices that are being developed in different segments of this industry. So one of the keys here is, how do we really avoid duplication of things like best practices, but also ensure that these things are actually spread and in a way that actually gets implemented? Because we can develop as many principles as we want or as many practices as we'd like, but if people don't actually use them and implement them, they're not much use. So thinking about how we sort of expand and actually get things implemented is important. The other point, too, is in terms of a stakeholder approach, we need to have more points of engagement and leverage, I think. We're a lot of internet people in this room. If we think about the Internet of Things, right? We're a lot of internet people. There's also a lot of the things people that are out there, right? That are putting this technology into the devices. The people that are making crock pots and coffee pots and, you name it, right? Refrigerators, everything, right? It's this interaction, and how do we get the things people more into these conversations as well? Okay, Avery is moving me on here. But just in closing, to hit with one of the other questions that was raised about needing to raise awareness with citizens and consumers, this is absolutely essential, especially if we think about this from a framework of trust, right? If people have to be technical experts in order to understand technology, the level of trust in the technology is going to be low. So we also need to think about ways to allow consumers to have informed choice and more simple knowledge of the objects and technology that they're interacting with. So with that, I will close. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one hand come up. Now, I wanted to hold all of the interactions until the end, but I'm concerned that you're leaving. So if it was like a clarification question on something that was said, please go ahead. If it's discussing a point, I'd like to ask you to wait until... Okay, then please, if you're, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that. And the next person I have is Olga Cavalli, who's basically been working with the ITU WS20 project. Is that the right name for it? But please go ahead.
Thank you, Avery, and I'm staying with you. I'm not leaving, so I'll stay here until the end of the session. Thank you for inviting me. To clarify my role here, I'm representing the ITUT Study Group 20, Internet of Things, and its application, including smart cities and communities. I'm just a rapporteur of question 6, which is about infrastructure for smart cities and communities. This is my role in the working group, but they asked me if I could give my perspective based on the studies that we are doing at my university with my students at University of Buenos Aires and my role in the working group. My role in the working group is representing an excellency center called CCAT Lab from Uruguay, where I do some work, academic work with them. And also they organize the South School of Internet Governance. Just briefly, the study group is organized into questions. I lost, here it is. So it's one part dedicated to Internet of Things and the other part of the study group dedicated to smart cities and communities, which is where I do my contribution as rapporteur of the question 6. And there is also a general question about research and emerging technologies, including terminologies and definitions. The group started in October 2015. It has been having meetings in Geneva and other places of the world. And I would like to make some comments, especially from, if I can, from a developing country perspective. I've been studying Internet of Things issues with my university and with my students, and we have written some papers. And I would like to focus a little bit on the ethical aspects of the Internet of Things from a developing country perspective. You know, especially in Latin America, we have very, very big cities. So we see Internet of Things as a major element to improve. We see it here, a major problem with traffic. We see distribution of water, electricity. So big cities are mostly in regions with developing countries. Mexico is a big city, Buenos Aires is a big city. Not every city has different types of public transportation, so it becomes very complicated. So we see Internet of Things as an element to improve the life of people living, especially in big urban areas, which are mainly in developing countries. But we see it also that it has to be doable and meaningful. Not all the applications may be relevant for developing countries, perhaps in the first stage of the development of this technology. So we see that has to be taken in consideration. It has to be, of course, good for businesses, but it has to be good for social, for the people, for social aspects, and also to improve economies, because we have to develop our economies. What we have seen is very interesting applications in smart agriculture. This is not so much related with smart cities, but we see that a good use of some resources in the agriculture could enhance the productivity of several things that are being done in these areas. We haven't. I was present in a very interesting seminar in the interior of Argentina last week, and we have seen many improvements in the use of water. For example, using it in relation with information from the weather. If it will rain, then you can use better the water. We can use some good experiences that are being used in Malaysia and other countries, so we are trying to improve that. What we have seen also in all these implementations of smart agriculture and cities is that the ones that are meaningful are organized or taken on by a group of different stakeholders, and we see a lot of value in that. So the local municipality or the local government or the state government, national government, universities having the knowledge, the companies providing the technology, and then the users, the agriculture people using that technology to enhance their production, and also some people involved in the economy as a general issue for. So those examples we see success in a multi-stakeholder perspective of implementing these projects, and we see there in this multi-stakeholder approach a good way to avoid capturing. Thank you. We don't have that you were approaching to us, so the environment is different.
We talked about me walking the aisle there, but
it won't work. So I will stop here. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the opportunity.
thank you very much. Olga. So the next speaker we have is Jari Arko, who's Ericsson and also chair of the IETF. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And first, I had a couple of comments on the statements and questions. I do, of course, agree with the importance of the balance in finding the ethical approach, and I agree with the need to educate users, and frankly, the industry and developers occasionally need some education as well. And definitely agree on the need for ontologies, also agree on proper security to avoid capture of devices. More on that in a sec. With regards to the suggestion of stimulating the use of the most available technologies possible, I'm not so totally sold on that yet. technology adoption is driven by need. But let me take another angle on this. In this whole conference, we have once again talked at length on connecting the people who are not connected yet. And that is, of course, very, very important. And much work remains. But it's not enough. There's much more that we need to do. Not just a matter of high-speed broadband, a question of quality, not just quantity. The open internet, local content, the ability of everybody to create new services. And on the IoT front, what about, say, instrumenting the farms of, or the fields of some farms, or acquiring the devices that can help people's health? Clearly, we have lots to do in the developing world, even when everybody is connected, if you connect the persons only. But I wanted to get back to the deeper technical things, at least a little bit. I wanted to highlight two problems that we at the IGF and the Internet Architecture Board have worked with this year. And I'm, I guess, quite happy about how we, the whole world, are building interoperable systems and standards, and we have different devices that can exist in the same networks. And then those networks are generally useful for multiple purposes. We can communicate over IP to other devices around the world, and so on. That's all very important and good. But unfortunately, we actually have ways to go when it comes to interoperability at the application level. I don't want to buy a house with Microsoft light switches and then find out I can't plug in the Apple light bulbs. More work is needed, and I wish the coalition paper said more of this. I think we discussed this a little bit, but I'm not sure if it's there yet. And this is where the ontologies, semantic descriptions, and more standards work comes in. So that would be a useful thing to do. Secondly, as you guys, I guess, have seen recently, the problems relating to the security of IoT devices are mounting. The situation is bad, and not just about the devices themselves and then being misused in their purpose, but they're also being hijacked to cause havoc somewhere else. Work is obviously needed here, and it will need to go into diverse topics inside that particular security issue. It's not just a technical thing, it's also a policy thing, a legal thing, a liability thing. So I think that's a perfect thing for the IGF in general to do, and also wish we could say some more in the dynamic coalition about that. I guess finishing with a sort of a techie perspective, that I wonder if we need to write a baseline RFC requirements RFC that says that you can't deploy millions of devices with default passwords. Duh, but that seems like a necessary statement to do at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very short statement. Didn't you have to do anything? But thanks a lot. So we seem to have moved from we need trust to it's really difficult to have trust, with a lot of work being done in between that's not necessarily helping. The next speaker I have is Vint Cerf, and yeah, Vint Cerf.
Thank you very much. I'm going to begin speaking with my Aaron hat on as an RIR, only to remind you that if we're going to have a big Internet of Things, it would be good to have a big address space. So please work on IPv6. I want to focus on a couple of things, particularly safety. We had a discussion in the previous session talking about principles. And I took the view in the principles discussion that safety ought to be very high on the list of things that the technical community attends to in the creation and operation of devices in this Internet of Things space. And safety is a very broad term. You don't want the device itself to malfunction, but you also don't want the device to be used for other purposes that create havoc, to use an appropriate term. And that gets back to what I would say is fundamentally access control. So I start from the view that the Internet as a network of networks is a kind of neutral platform on top of which we're going to attach, or to which we will attach, all these billions of devices. And the idea here is that we want the people who use the devices, the people who make the devices, to be attentive to the safety of these things that are attached to this neutral communication system. In theory, we would want every device to be able to communicate with every other one. However, for the most part, we would never want a device to be able to communicate with all of the devices. You want to constrain this, and that's what the access control question is about. the task here is not solely in the hands of the programmers and the producers of the equipment. The users themselves have some responsibility as well. Suppose, for example, that you chose to acquire a collection of devices, and for your convenience, you decide to put no access control on them at all. Well, you may be creating a hazard for other people, even though your devices may not harm you, they may be used to harm others. So in some sense, there is a responsibility on the user side which will not be exercised unless the users actually understand and appreciate what their responsibilities are and how they can execute them. So it's really an amazingly broad area in which to opine, because many different parties have some responsibility to achieve the outcome, which is a safe Internet of Things environment. Actually, I think I want to stop there. I realize I have more time, but I'd much rather get into interactive discussion than just preaching at you, which is what Internet evangelists tend to do. So I'll stop there.
Probably should have sat somewhere else.
Maybe we can still pull the tables apart.
Oh, and have me walk back and forth, yes. Thank you for mentioning the user responsibility. I mean, one of the things that's come up is that, but then again, I'll ask a question perhaps for later, is it really possible to make sure that in an Internet of Things, everyone will actually know what they're supposed to do? But I leave that one on the table for now, because that informed consent and informed user is a very difficult concept. Next, we have Grace Abu Hamed from NTIA, who will make a comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Avery. For those of you, many of you probably are familiar with NTIA, but for those of you who aren't, we are the executive branch agency in the U.S. government that is primarily responsible for advising the president on telecommunications and information policy issues. Like many of you have said already in this session, the Department of Commerce has recognized Internet of Things as an emerging technology trend, but we recognize that it's also not necessarily very different from the Internet or from the policy issues that we face with the Internet today. We're excited about the opportunities. We're also aware of the challenges. We recognize that there's a difference here with the scope and the scale of the effects that the policy could have on the Internet of Things. And so we're taking the question of the policy issues very seriously. One of the things we've done to do this is we've launched a request for comments in the spring. We received 130 comments. Many of you in the room did submit comments, so thank you. We are assessing the comments, and part of what we're doing with the feedback we received is we're looking at what our stakeholder community would like us to do in terms of Internet policy and in terms of assessing what a role for the government could be in the Internet of Things. We held a workshop in September to further discuss some of the questions that were raised in the comments, and we're going to be issuing a policy paper at the end of the year. So it's coming shortly. And that will kind of focus on the technical aspects, the potential role of government, and benefits and challenges that we see and that we've collected from our stakeholders. Another thing that we've started working on is NTIA believes in the multi-stakeholder model. We take it very seriously, and we've launched our 6th multi-stakeholder process. This one in particular is focused on IoT consumer device patchability and upgradability, and this is important. We were given confidence that this was the right topic for a multi-stakeholder process, mainly because in 2015 we launched a request for comments on cybersecurity issues and asked people what they would like to see, what our community would like to see attention drawn to in the cybersecurity field, and we got the most response on IoT devices and in security. So we've been really digging into that. The multi-stakeholder process launched in October. They've split into 5 subgroups, and they're working through different issues. And like Assistant Secretary Strickling said yesterday, we believe very strongly that when you focus a multi-stakeholder process on a specific issue, you get the best outcomes. So this is what NTIA is doing, and the Department of Commerce writ large. We are very excited to work with our stakeholders around the world and in the United States to make sure that we get the policy questions right for the Internet of Things. So, thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Max Angus from Google.
Wonderful. Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. I thought I'd give a little bit of a perspective from the private sector and from how Google is thinking about the Internet of Things, thereby connecting it with the ethical questions that, in fact, myself and Vince Cerf and others are thinking about quite intensely in the moment as we're preparing a chapter that hopefully we can also make available and discuss with this community when it's ready. Before I get to that, I wanted to reiterate the point. We have education mentioned in the ethics paper, in the coalition paper already. Informed users is what we want, and the whole notion of shared responsibility might be something that can be more explicitly addressed in the paper and teased out in order to hopefully encourage work in the in curating and thinking about the various responsibilities of the different stakeholders and how they come together. Yeah, to report a little bit from what we're thinking and discussing at Google, interoperability is clearly one of the key enablers for the Internet of Things, and Jari has pointed to the IAB workshop on semantic interoperability earlier this year. We have started to work with a number of colleagues on extending schema.org, which arguably is one of the most successful efforts to bring semantic interoperability to the World Wide Web. And we think it makes sense to explore if we can build on top of that rather than reinventing the wheel and finding another semantic space for IoT. Probably, or the approach is not so much to say this is going to be the standard, but to bring together a variety of schemas from the various stakeholders and then see what can be distilled on a level higher so that we actually understand each other. So at iot.schema.org, you can have a look at the initial information. The project just got started, but everybody is welcome to contribute. Importantly, interoperability doesn't only, it's not a technical goal, not only a technical goal. It has the goals to collect and connect the different devices and elements in the Internet of Things to create ensembles or kind of capabilities that go beyond any individual devices. And I think that is a very interesting environment because it also brings new responsibilities and complexities in the environments that we see. The other element that Google, as you've probably followed with launches like the Assistant, is very interested in is machine learning, and in the context of IoT, specifically federated machine learning, and how the learning is happening on devices in home environments or local cloud environments and then in the cloud. And again, I think there are interesting ethical questions that come with that that probably deserve a whole separate conversation, but are also relevant in the context of IoT. And then, of course, privacy, security, and safety is very high on our list of activities. And we like to frame it as an opportunity for Google to show that we are actually a progressive player and helping to provide privacy solutions for that space rather than causing the problem. So again, anybody who's interested in that, welcome to come up and talk to me after the session and see how we can collaborate. Clearly, the assistant and machine learning provide a new surface, a new interface for IoT and other environments, and we think that might be a very important driver of IoT adoption and development. My personal work is in the research arm of Google, and I'd like to invite everybody to speak with me about collaborating on research and open innovation efforts, both from the academic community as well as from the private community. And if there's public-private partnerships or governments, we're interested to do R&D with them too. The last comment or proposal that I wanted to bring to the coalition was to explore if we want to follow an approach that I've learned from the colleagues. Professor Jim Fishkin from Stanford is here today. He developed a method called deliberative polling. There are several elements of that. One in particular I could imagine being very useful for this emergent field of policymaking, and that is the development of balanced briefing materials. In that approach, you basically identify what the policy challenges are, and then you list the different options and proposals. Almost like a Wikipedia article, what results is a neutral point of view description of what's going on. If we think that the issues that we are discussing should be in the briefing folders of a lot of stakeholders and policymakers, that might be a good way to ensure that the people are actually receiving balanced briefing materials, and hence I'd like to discuss that with the group. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker, before we get to open it up to the whole room, and those who are participating remotely, is Joseph Aladef from Oracle and chair of ICC Basis. Please.
Thank you. I was going to focus on a few of the issues and the questions, and I also wanted to say, Wolfgang, you look marvelous for having been around when Marie Curie was finding radium, so that was great. But the concept of ethical as sufficient, doable, and sustainable is fine. There's no problem with that, but it's missing a societal dimension to it. And the societal dimension is that, and this goes to the question of the maximum use of technology, and I agree with Jari that maximum is not a good word to use, because the question is, are we using technology to the maximum utility for the social benefit it can create? And that's what's left off the table when you look at sufficient, doable, and sustainable, because that focuses just on the individual as opposed to the societal issue. The societal issue goes in many ways to the ecosystem concept. Not what is the sensor doing, but what can you do with the information the sensor has collected in order to create that societal benefit? Whether it's in medicine, whether it's in logistics, whether it's in traffic management for a city, whether it's in urban planning, sustainable consumption. That's really a focus issue where there is a huge opportunity cost created by reticence risk. People don't actually do as much as they can. And the question is, because often they're looking at what is a formulaic checkbox of what do I need to do to comply? And they don't understand how to put that risk in context. And therefore they don't use what they can in the technology that exists or the data that is available. And so the question is, how do we get away from the checkbox, not to in any way lower the standard, but to make its implementation flexible and appropriate for the level of technology that we're at? Because something that was drafted even currently may not be able to keep up with the pace of change of technology. So that's one of the things that we need to think about and recognize that there is an opportunity cost to not using these technologies. Not that these technologies should be used for the purpose of using technology itself. Using technology for the sake of technology is never a good idea. But using technology to accomplish a useful end is. The other thing I think which Olga raised was the concept of what we mean, occasionally we keep on focusing on high tech. In many of the developing countries, there are low-tech solutions that can help food safety and food security. A sensor, text-based messaging, a university's database are all that you might need to dramatically improve agriculture or dramatically improve the lives, or even schedule a bus route so that someone who has a bus that comes once a week isn't waiting for 2 days for the bus because they have no idea when it's going to come because it doesn't come with regularity. That gets us a little bit also to the education part. I remember there was a young man at the meeting we had in Yao Pessoa, and he did not see himself in any of our conversation. And it took creating an example of agriculture of we put sensors in the ground, we understand what the flow rate of the river is, we match it to weather patterns, we look at the soil composition, we use a local university to do some analysis, and all of a sudden the farmer gets a roadmap as to what is best to grow, what will sustain their best, what might be most available in other markets, and competitively what he should think about growing. So that story allowed him to understand a utility that made sense to him. It's also important to actually have that kind of education for consumers, because it is impossible for them to understand risks when you talk to them about theory. They have to understand risks in application, and risks vary across applications. But understanding the contextual application, including its benefit, allows them to do some evaluation of the risk. That doesn't mean that the people who develop systems don't have to think about risk and don't have to address it, but you also want a consumer to have some information base upon which they can make decisions on what they use and how to use it. And and understanding the contextual application, both benefit and risk, allows them to be better informed in making that decision. The last thing I wanted to talk about is kind of the ecosystem issue. And we have to remember that a lot of these sensors get connected through local area networks. And that might be one of the places where we stress putting the intelligence. So Yari, yes, we'd like your Apple light bulb to talk to your Microsoft or Google Home, but we'd also want to make sure that they can take instructions from it. Because you don't want the individual to have to go to every single device they own to program every single device for a preference. You'd like them to be able to use a local area network of a smart house. And from an Oracle perspective, when we think of a smart city, we actually think of a nervous system. We don't think of just a bunch of connected sensors. We think of the back end connecting to the details and then the decision-making apparatus that goes with it. So perhaps we can think about houses in that way too.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all the speakers, and especially for not only the great content, but also for all keeping to time, which was really wonderful. I'd like to open up the discussion broader. I already had one person that I put on hold before, and then I'll start collecting names, but second one, okay. And then I see many, I'll try to catch them, but yes, okay, thank you. So please go ahead.
Yeah.
The microphone?
No, yes, it's working, yeah?
Yeah, that one's working, so please go ahead.
Okay. My name is Michael Boni, I'm from European Parliament, and thank you very much for inspiring presentations, and I think that some issues are very important. 3 points. Firstly, that we need to raise the awareness of the problem and disseminate those awareness, because we need to have users with much more responsibility and deeper understanding of all problems related to Internet of Things. This is very important when we will start the common work between humans and learning machines. It will be completely new interactions, and we need to prepare people to cooperate with all of those devices, especially with artificial intelligence. Secondly, I think that those ethical approach is very important, and we need to talk about security, safety, privacy, but also to ensure that the model of choices for consumers. We understand that now there is just about 1,000 devices which can communicate on at the 1 square kilometer. In 5G, we will have 1 million devices which will be able to communicate among themselves. So I think it will be a completely new situation also for humans living among those devices. And the third point, legislation. I think that we need to be very cautious, and this idea of dynamic coalition, I think, can give us the possibility to exchange and to disseminate best practices, not to over-regulate these completely new approaches and solutions. Rather, we need to use, I'm from European Parliament, the soft law, code of conduct, invite all stakeholders to discuss how to use those new things, not to start with a stronger and very strong regulation. And the last point, we will have the next meeting, so I'm very sorry we will need to go and move just before the end of the meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you. Now I'll come to you next. I have one person there with the microphone, and then I'll come to you. Is it okay with you to let the woman who needs to? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Can you use the microphone?
Yeah, please use the microphone, and please introduce yourself.
Going to repeat anything what my colleague said, well, and I have not the time. Pilar del Castillo, member of the European Parliament. Sorry. I would like to insist in one idea that goes around, which is consumers. I mean, Vincent said that in some sense it's responsibility responsibilities in the user side. I think it's nothing different from the physical world. If we make a list of the kind of things that, because we are proactive, are secure for us, it is in a mechanical way now. We do it in a mechanical way. It's a routine way. It's generation through generation. We are learning on that. So I think it's a key point, in order to have such a trust we need. I mean, we can use this Beatles song, all you need is love, all you need is trust, is what we have now. This is very clear. And the trust has scaled up because the Internet of Things developments. And in that context, and having taken granted there's so many things that are here, I think proactive users is absolutely a key point to get that trust. So I have to leave now.
Sorry. Very sorry.
Okay,
Very
thank
sorry,
you.
sorry.
Sorry I made you wait so long to be able to get your comments in. Please, gentleman in the back with the microphone, and please introduce yourself.
Yes.
And I'm going to try and go from side to side.
My name is Jeff Jaffe from W3C. Several people mentioned the importance of semantic interoperability for the Internet of Things, and I just wanted to point out to folks that the W3C is starting a new Web of Things working group. We call it the Web of Things not because it's different than the Internet of Things, but because we're looking at the implications of IoT at the web level. And indeed, that group is trying to develop open standards for semantic interoperability. So if people think that that's important, please pass the word around, and hopefully we'll get a lot of involvement in that.
Thank you. Now, I've just noticed a lot of seats emptied up, so we only have one mic. Yeah, now it's the European Parliament. We only have one microphone, so please pass that microphone down to here, and please go ahead. Yeah. It's really hard for me to tell at this point because so many hands came up. Okay, you're at the table. Please go ahead while the microphone is being passed, and then.
Hi, I'm Ian Fish. Ian Fish, BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT from UK. Firstly, Wolfgang's gone now, yes. He did a great job in keeping this alive when it suffered from the too early syndrome, where we were way ahead of our time, and it never pays to be ahead of the time. But a number of things came to my mind when I was listening to this, and the first was when Karen, and she's gone as well, I know, Karen Rose, said now everything is connected to the internet. And that made me think that actually we were too internet-centric in our thinking about this, because it's actually about the people, which a lot of people since have said, so that's good. Then I started thinking about the internet of, I'll call it the internet of trust, but trust in the internet and the Internet of Things is vital to this. And I was wondering whether and how much accountability for every transaction that happens in real time might help to adjust this. And I wonder if we could discuss that at all, if it's a possibility. And thirdly, and lastly, I think that when Yari was talking about the security of devices coming to the fore and the need to be able to, and the other people who talk about the need to be able to patch and interact, that is vital. And that goes back to often, because a number of things at the moment, for example, smart meters, have been specified, the contracts have been let by governments, and they have not actually thought about this, and therefore they've gone for the lowest option, and it hasn't been one of the requirements up till now. Maybe in future, after what's happened recently, it will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have someone with a microphone now.
Hi.
And then,
Jim Fishkin from Stanford University. I just wanted to follow up on Max's comment. Look, I think the Internet of Things over time is likely to transform life as we know it. That has many social implications that will pose innumerable ethical dilemmas, trade-offs, only some of which we can now anticipate. We cannot hope to have a positive impact on that just through general ethical guidelines and principles. There are going to be specific dilemmas posing trade-offs. We practice what I call deliberative democracy, where we take scientific random samples of a population, usually the public, sometimes, as last year, of the IGF. other populations, multi-stakeholder populations, the mass public. There ought to be a series of, in my view, and I'm not just hawking my own line of work, there ought to be a series of representative and thoughtful consultations with the people who are going to have to live with this new world that is emerging in order to get their feedback in a thoughtful and representative way about some of these dilemmas. I'm not sure the exact context, but I think there ought to be a conversation about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you please go next? Because I had you on the list, and then I'm going to go over to the other side, and we'll get to as many people as we can in the minutes we have. So, please.
Thanks very much. My name's Julie Zoller, and I work for the U.S. State Department. And one of the things that I most often hear in my work with other governments is an impulse to regulate and standardize on a worldwide basis the Internet of Things. And so what I'm interested in from this community is what work have you done to ensure interoperability and let the ecosystem evolve and innovate without that worldwide standardization approach.
So what I'm going to do is, by the way, just so we have an idea, I'm going to go to as many people to speak, and I'll come back to the panelists in the last 15 minutes. So that gives us another 15 minutes to collect comments from people. I understand that we have a comment that was remote. And who was here next?
Yes, my name is Luis van der Laan, but somebody sent me a message on Messenger. I love the internet. This is Wafa Ben Hassin from Tunisia, who's been following discussion. She asks, and anybody who feels they want to answer, what are the differences between policy priorities for the global south as opposed to the global north when it comes to the Internet of Things? What are the primary particularities, especially with regards to different bodies of government and, in some cases, historical abuse of personal data? Who is going to set the rules? I think it's an excellent question, by the way.
Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Soumya Karun, and I'm a project manager, legal and policy researcher with the Center for Communication Governance in New Delhi, which is associated with the National Law University. And we've actually been engaging with a lot of these policy processes. And in fact, the government earlier this year brought out a draft policy on the Internet of Things, which is really ambitious. I mean, all sorts of applications, rural and urban, and in terms of climate change, sustainable development, all manners of things, really. But glaringly lacking in any sort of a governance framework. This is, I think, particularly important because we do not have a data protection law of any sort. We may not even have a constitutional right to privacy if some people have their way. So in that context, my question is really to the gentleman from the industry, say Oracle, Ericsson, Google. In this context, when we're dealing with jurisdictions, when there is no data protection law or privacy laws, and yet the Internet of Things has continued to evolve and continue to have these applications and continue to pose these risks, can we hope that these parties are going to engage proactively with these jurisdictions or governments to ensure that privacy and data protection remains important? And yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Would you like to go next? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Marco Harder from the Philippines. I work for a technology consulting company in the Philippines, and I personally specialize in the area of human resources as it relates to technology. And as the discussions were going, it reminded me of a conversation I had with a client where the HR head of this group was coming to us saying, how do I now use the Internet of Things to improve the wellness programs of my company? And they were talking about using wearables like Fitbit and gathering data, how long you've been sitting, if you've been doing any exercise the past week, and using those analytics to be able to design their wellness programs. And I think this amplifies 2 points that were raised today. First off is from the gentleman from Oracle saying that maximizing the use of technology in order to not just look at the benefits to the individual, but a bigger group. And secondly, I think the conversations that we had amplified the point of the multi-stakeholder approach when it comes to the Internet of Things, because it wasn't really the technology issues that we were grappling. It was more around the governance around employee-employer privacy laws, medical confidentiality rules in the Philippines. So I think I just wanted to bring that up because most of the discussions I've been seeing revolve around the business and consumer, but some of us forget that the users of the IoT and the backend around it also goes to smaller scale implementations like human resources or finance or other groups. So that's just I wanted to share to this forum.
I'm Larry Magid with ConnectSafely.org, and we're a Silicon Valley-based internet safety, privacy, and security nonprofit NGO. I want to pick up on what Vit said about user responsibility, and also, I apologize, I don't know the name of the lady, the chair, questioning whether or not we can educate people. And I think the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes, we can educate people, but no, we cannot assume in the near term that we are going to educate the entire population. If you look at the history of the web and of the app world, of the world that we have been living in over the last 20 or so years, many of the major attacks have had to do with social engineering or simply human error or simply bad password management of things of that nature. I think the same will likely be true with Internet of Things, that user education is very important. I, for one, have pledged ConnectSafely.org to do all we can with our partners, which include Google and Facebook and others in this room, to try to promote a user education for adults and children as well. And I want to tell a very, very quick story personally, how I even myself had to be doing some education, because I have a system that I can control from my smartphone, which among other things can open my garage door. And it turns out that the poor design of the app is that if I put this phone in my pocket while the app is running, it is quite possible that I will pocket dial the open garage door command. And this has happened 3 times till I finally learned to always close the app before putting the phone in my pocket. Now, that's actually bad software design, but it is also user education. And there's a tremendous amount that I think we all have to learn, as I at least, close to patient zero, struggle with trying to figure out how to have a home that's actually safer as a result of IoT as opposed to less safe. And it's a little of both. So I applaud Vince's proposal. I think it's absolutely essential. And I hope that all of the organizations in this room will do everything they can to provide that good consumer education.
Thank you.
Thank you, Avery. I'm Paul Wilson from APNIC, we're the RIR Regional Internet Address Registry for Asia Pacific. I just came from another workshop about the IoT called Finding the Internet in the IoT. I think it should have been Finding the IoT in the Internet, actually, because I normally refer to the so-called IoT. I think it's damaging and risky to actually be continually referring to the IoT without being very clear about what it is or isn't, because it is not something that's identifiable or distinguishable or partitionable from the internet. IoT might be a new word for the internet itself. In that case, that's fine. But if we start to try and regulate for the IoT and set up new standards and new processes for the IoT, then we're really trying to do something that is a losing activity, I think. We've been connecting things to the internet for a very long time, and over the years they've become more numerous. They've become more importantly, they've become much more diverse in terms of the models and the manufacturers who are involved. But what we see today are really the same issues of software security, device security that we've seen with laptops and operating systems and phones and apps and all sorts of devices over many, many years. Something that's changing now is not just the numbers, but the pressure on time to market, which is kind of a curse. It has been for Microsoft, if we remember some of their software releases over the years. But it also goes back to car manufacturing and aircraft manufacturing and all sorts of stuff, so that's not new either. We talk in the IoT about interoperability and rights and data protection, and many things that we should recognise are at the application and usage layers in the internet model. And of course it's very important to establish standards for those things, but again, not to see them as new special needs of this so-called IoT, because these are challenges that have existed for many years, and organisations like W3C absolutely need to be recognised for the work that they're doing and now collaborating and linking in with the IoT concept. But they've been working on payment systems and accessibility and media and encryption and authentication and all sorts of stuff for many years. And the risk of not seeing this, I think, is that manufacturers want to become IoT companies, and they may not understand that they may need to become internet companies beforehand or at the same time. They don't have to see themselves that way, but there are actually huge benefits in looking at what has gone on before over many, many years of internet evolution, because there is an ecosystem that they're entering, and there needs to be, I think, a merger or a harmonization between that internet ecosystem that they're coming into and the existing manufacturing ecosystems to make sure that they can take advantage respectively of what's gone before. There's one very important subset of the internet ecosystem, which is the security ecosystem, which itself is something that internet companies need to understand and enter, with eyes open seriously. The last workshop spoke about whether we could see the multi-stakeholder aspects of the IoT, and I don't think we need to ask that question if we see the IoT as an inseparable subset of the internet itself, because we all understand and agree these days, I'm sure, that the internet is a multi-stakeholder ecosystem, and we accept that, and we surely, I hope, don't have to have a new argument to reinvent that wheel as a special move for the IoT. So thanks for that.
On this side, I saw some hands before, but I don't know if I've missed anybody, and I managed to get people from that side to move to the table. So I wanted to make sure that, were there any hands while I'm up here? Okay, I'll get the microphone down to you in a bit, unless you can get to the table, and then I'll have a couple hands over there. Okay, so excuse me, I probably did not duck under that properly, but anyway. So one here, and then there's two in the back there, and then I'm going to return to the panel for some responses. Yes, I should have.
Jivan, Macedonia. I just wanted to address three things very quickly, rapid fire. First one is that I think that we've been discussing way too long Internet of Things without starting to discuss in parallel the immersion of artificial intelligence in it, in much greater depth. Second, in being careful not to go against one of the architects of the internet, but I'm worried if such a figure and Google itself would think that the responsibility for this thing should be at the consumer level. I think that, it's like opening up the floodgates and, saying that, it's your responsibility to swim. I think that this is such a huge thing that is opening up that the responsibility should be at a different level. Perhaps I misunderstood, but it's said, okay, but a few people have said it like that. And in lieu of that, I think that somebody said that, I think that the ICC basis gentleman mentioned the concentrating on the LAN level, and I would like to hear more about that, because I think that putting the intelligence in the Internet of Things at that level has some depth, and perhaps we should explore it more in this workshop. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm going to collect two more comments and then go back to the panel. I think it's been an excellent set of comments.
Hi, Gunilla Estbrink from Women with Disabilities Australia. And I come from a user group that is crying out for applications that can be used in the homes, smart homes, opening and closing curtains, doors, garage doors, whatever. And they have been very expensive up to now for people with disabilities, very expensive. And this is an opportunity for people to actually use mainstream applications that are coming in under smart housing. But they need to be accessible, they need to be user-friendly. So I implore web designers, all sorts of application designers, to consider making these applications user-friendly and intuitive. Thanks.
Was there another hand back here? No, there wasn't. So then I guess you get to be the last commenter, and then we move on back to our speakers.
Thank you very much, Avery. Olivier Crépin-Leblond speaking. I'm the chair of the Dynamic Coalition on Core Internet Values. And before Vint came over to you, he was in the room just across the corridor, and he also presented his proposal to us, and that also brought some lively discussions. I'm not quite sure what the discussions were like immediately after your proposal here, Vint, but I can see there's certainly a lot of movement here, and it's one of these topics that is really very important. And we also had Martin Botterman with us, and I'd like to take this opportunity to ask whether we could continue collaboration between our dynamic coalitions, because I think it's important. Core Internet Values and IoT.
Let's make sure they're not scheduled at the same time next time.
of dynamic coalitions is something we really do need to work on, and we'll be working on and have a meeting on later in the week. Okay, this time I'm going to try and go through reverse order on the speakers. So, Joseph, you'll get to go first. Please, a minute or two. We've got essentially 15 minutes left to this discussion, and I'd like to give you all a chance to comment. Thanks.
I guess I'll answer first to the question that came up related to India, because yes, it is a problem if there's no data protection law. The closest thing you have in India is the IT Act amendments, which look at the security issues of data protection law, but it's a conversation that has to be had in a multi-stakeholder fashion across all the elements, government, business, and civil society. I just wanted to make one comment on Paul, because Paul is more complex than you said, because they have to also become a telco, because they're also using SIM cards. And so there's a huge complexity to how this happens. Manufacturers are not looking at what that complexity might be. So that's an issue that has to be brought to bear. And lastly, from Vint, I think it's not just the hijacking of the device, but the use of the data from the device, as in the RFID tires kind of issue that had come up.
Okay, thank you. Max, any comments on what you've heard?
Yes, just quickly, I agree, of course, that the definition for the Internet of Things is an ongoing point, but what we find in our discussions internally, which are also, different product areas, is that the internetworking of these things is what it's about, and that defines also the scope of what we're talking about when we're talking about IoT. I think in a good way regarding, for a coalition here, we couldn't talk about everything. We can't boil the ocean. So how do we interconnect the things and make them interoperable and work together? I think that's a useful distinction. Also for the comment on privacy and IoT, I think it has been said before, but important to reiterate, all the existing legislation and regulation on privacy remains, so there's no need to come up with an IoT privacy law or something like that. And a quick comment on the colleague from the Australian Women's with Disability Groups, I think IoT actually has enormous potential to transform exactly the lives of people with disabilities and other challenges. And in fact, accessibility is good design, and good IoT accessibility is going to be a great way to promote the use cases and the value of IoT.
Thank you. Grace, please, if you have any comments, any responses.
Thank you. I think we've seen there's been a difficulty with incentives for the private sector. In the United States, we've been proponents of private sector-led policies and development of Internet of Things, standards and technologies, et cetera. But there's been a difficulty on the incentive side. And so I think part of what Commerce is doing in creating these multi-stakeholder processes and launching the policy paper, et cetera, is to help with fostering an environment that is friendly to the private sector and to civil society. And I think we heard a lot of people in the room here with some different initiatives, and we'd like to, make sure that we continue to foster those types of initiatives, work with the Dynamic Coalition and other international organizations to keep this sort of private sector, civil society-led and multi-stakeholder-led, movement. So that. We encourage you to get involved, and you've heard a lot about different multi-stakeholder processes today. Encourage you to get involved in different ones depending on your expertise. And as Wolfgang noted earlier, the Internet of Things is multi-sectoral, and we need more involvement from the different sectors. So if you spread the word and bring more people into the community, I think that's how we're going to develop the best policies bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you take the transcript of this session and add it to the information that you're collecting. Okay, Vint, I have you next on the list. Thank you.
First of all, I did not say that the users are solely responsible for safe operation of their devices. What I said is that they have a responsibility. So let me make this even more plain. Speaking from the ethical point of view, we should be making devices responsibly, so the makers have a responsibility, but we should be using them responsibly as well. Second, I'd like to point out that artificial intelligence and machine learning are not the same thing. There's a lot of machine learning that goes on that's quite mechanical, and I've discovered devices that learn the wrong things. like my thermostats that think I'm never at home, and keep the house very cold during the winter and very hot during the summer. I also wanted to remind people that there was a comment about local area networking and connectivity of devices locally. This is very important. It would not be a good thing to have a house that doesn't work if it's not connected to the internet. In spite of my long-term connection with the network, I don't love it that much that I want my house to not work when it's not connected. So that's very important. When we speak of Internet of Things, we actually misrepresent what's going on. These are programmable devices that are capable of being networked. Let me just stop there. They don't have to be on the public internet to be useful. They may be very useful if they are on the public internet, but they may also be quite dangerous. And so let's be careful with our vocabulary. I think Paul was right to remind us about that. And that may mean that using the term Internet of Things it's pretty well embedded in our vocabulary now, but it may draw the wrong picture to what these devices are capable of doing and what we can constrain them to do.
Thank you. Yari, I have you next, so if you would have some comments and responses to some of the things you've heard.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to follow up quickly on this comment that Joe made about the question regarding areas where you have no regulation on, say, privacy or data protection. And I just wanted to add one thing, which is that when the industry or companies or open source world creates solutions, they usually try to accommodate the whole world. So even if there's no regulation for a particular thing, usually the capabilities exist in products and systems. You may not be required to use them, but they do exist. It's a good thing. The other comment that I wanted to reply to was this discussion between different governments and there being sometimes a knee-jerk reaction to have more regulation and standards for IoT. And I very much agree about the regulation piece, but maybe not surprisingly, I disagree on the standards piece. Maybe there's a distinction between mandatory and voluntary standards. I may be more on the camp of voluntary standards. I think most of the world actually operates on voluntary standards. If you like something and you find it useful, then you pick it on and you use it. And if your customers demand you to do a particular standard, then that's business as usual. And I'd also like to point out the internet allows basically infinite freedom to create these new solutions, and we just can't stop that in any way. So even if there are standards, doesn't mean that you can't have other solutions. And so I can't say what the governments were saying or the other governments were saying, but I think we in the industry are calling for sufficient standardization and allowing innovation on top of that, or for innovation for further variants of that standard. And I think we currently would actually, the world would benefit from further standardization in the area of IoT because our solutions are fairly fragmented, and we could actually create a bigger market by having more standards and more interoperability. It would be a benefit for all of us. All of us would win. But it's not about shutting down anybody's other ideas. And nor could we do that even if we wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you, Yari. Olga? Please, if you have any comments or responses.
Yes, thank you. Again, trying to bring some perspective from the developing countries. I do agree with Vin that IPv6 is a big issue, especially in developing economies. I know that RIRs and ISPs and many other actors are doing the best that they can, but there's still way to go on. There are policy challenges. The thing with developing economies is that the priorities are always others. So us that we are involved in these discussions are the ones to bring this issue to the local authorities, so to avoid future captures or security and privacy implications. I like the idea of the neutral point of view briefing papers. We have a language issue, so we can help in translating those documents. That could be very useful at the local level. And then to the private sector, I think Joseph captured my idea of doing simple things with simple technology, may change a lot at the local level, and then it can be enhanced with other layers of complex technology, but that could be the starting point. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And very much appreciated the conversation, the brevity with which people made their comments, and the multivariate picture that's been built of this problem space that we're working on here. So very much appreciate that. Before passing the microphone back to the chair of the Dynamic Coalition, I also want to remind you that the Dynamic Coalitions, all of them, have put forth a bunch of different questions. There's a Dynamic Coalitions booth in the booth city where these questions, and there is a survey on them. So I'd really appreciate it if all of you, since we all do have to pass through that area several times, to stop at the Dynamic Coalition booth, check out the questions for this Dynamic Coalition, as well as some of the others, because getting those survey questions answered would be a really useful thing for the Dynamic Coalitions in general, which, as a MAG member, I've been trying to help coordinate. So thank you very much for that, and it's yours.
Well, thanks again for your excellent moderation. And yes, these questions are also online, not only in the booth. Right. This is the internet. So I really wanted to thank you all for your participation, active participation, for your interest. I had the impression the people who left the room before time didn't do so because they were bored by the session. So for sure, in that way, finding better ways to schedule in next IGF would be excellent. I do also believe that we did have a good session which brought us further on some of the perspectives. This is not a domain that is stuck or before its time anymore. It's hot business and we are in the middle of it. I think the need to have even more people be aware and not only to tell us what they want, but also to be responsible players in this on all levels is important, from user up to supplier, up to network provider, up to platform provider. And in that, indeed, the call for open platforms is one that is still out there. And I think several will. I'm not seeking for one solution, but at least some that are interoperable for the Google light bulb in the Microsoft house, or was it the other way around? Very important. Also, on particularly in this level, what has more emphasis here than anywhere else is what the application is for developing countries. And whereas I heard Jerry say, well, we really need a lot of bandwidth, I also heard recognition, I saw Jari shake nod in that as well, that low bandwidth can already bring such a lot with these technologies in areas that really need it. So in that, I've been privileged to be part of a session at the International Center for Theoretic Physics in Trieste. That's a UN-supported platform, Italy-supported platform, and ISOC had supported it too. And what they do is they bring in people from Africa, young people from Africa, to learn. They come there for 6-week intern or 3 months intern, and they learn everything about a certain subjects, from connecting the bits to the wires to the wireless, to how you go about this in a country to have policies that support a good use of technology. So initiatives like that, capacity building around the world, is important too. In those countries, if people themselves know how to do it, they're much closer to the problems and technology becomes easier all the time. So, and privacy and data protection, yes, this will continue to be an issue that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, we end up in a world that we don't want to be in anymore, or we don't want our children to be in. Can I have the slides back for the remarks for the questions for tomorrow? And I would like to leave you with that. So tomorrow, and these questions are already there today. By the way, this slide set is connected to this item in the program, so you can download it as well. There's also links to more information on the internet on the activities. But first, complexity will go up. And I think we will need to increasingly use technology to deal with complexity. Algorithms is something I'd like to take out there. Algorithms, maybe they should be ethical too. And I'll just leave it to there because I know we don't have a discussion. Blockchain is something that is a trendy term, but let's be realistic about it and see what these kind of technologies can help and where they can help. So that's on complexity, dealing with complexity. The other one was indeed, as was remarked already, on machine learning and AI. Imagine an environment that is totally arranging our lives around us, or that of our parents who cannot take care fully of themselves anymore. What happens if they take decisions on what is best for those people that they care for? Basically, in that way, that environment is almost like a robot that is acting. And obviously, my best insight in that is coming from Asimov, the three laws. But we may need to find and implement.
There are four. There are 4 laws, not 3.
What is the fourth?
Well, the 0th law had to do with not harming humanity, but go ahead.
That's a tricky one. What does it do to me? Indeed, the last one, again, data protection and privacy concerns is something that's going to stay with us. And we already see that some new business models are set up where data ownership is seen as a liability. Wouldn't it be great if we can use data for the good in this world? So let's keep that balance in mind as well. So these subjects may be higher on the agenda for next time. For this time, we'll make a report on this session. The transcript provided by the Secretariat is very useful in this. And again, if you have any more suggestions, realize that you can always inform us. And if you send me an email, I'll share it with those who are in the Dynamic Coalition. Last but not least is a call for you to get involved. This work is done by volunteers for more than 8 years now. The volunteers are, I'm impressed by the work and the support I get and we do together, where we've gotten to, and we always find good interest and high quality sessions at IGF and in between. At the same time, maybe there is some benefit in other organizations and some sponsorship to come in to get some real work done in this same fashion of independent, global level, multi-stakeholder approach. So if you have ideas on how to make this more sustainable and more impactful in that way without harming this principle, I'd be very interested to hear from you as well. And I'll be here the rest of the week as well. So speakers, thank you very much for your excellent contributions. Avery, you've been impressive again. I loved it when you got up and did your walk again. And everybody here, thank you very much for your attentive interest and look forward to hear more from you.